A pink-haired woman and gray-haired man approach large ornate doors.
The pink-haired woman in a light blue gown looks down pensively.
Walking through a palace, the pink-haired woman appears suddenly startled.
The gray-haired man commands her to look forward and stand straight.
She looks up at the man while he continues his instructions.
A close-up shows the pink-haired woman smiling with purple eyes.
He asks his queen if he can keep any secrets from her.
The man smiles, noting that her insight is why he chose her. Arm in arm, the couple moves forward as the man simply agrees.
From behind, the couple walks together toward a bright, sunlit excerpt.
A map shows the nation of Verite at the continent Serre.
King Wilfrid is described as the cold and intellectual 75th monarch. Narrative text explains how the king restored order by overthrowing a tyrant. The queen is depicted as a courageous figure standing beside the king.
Legend states that Helene possessed a divine ability to see the past.
Helene Fauser reflects on her lonely childhood following her mother's death. A gray-haired man returns to a mansion and is welcomed as Marquis.
Two maids stand side by side as a young pink-haired girl watches.
The young girl welcomes her father, but he walks past coldly. The Marquis questions why the child is near his private study.
The young girl falls to the floor with a startled cry.
He sternly reminds her that she was forbidden from approaching his study. A man reaches out a hand to help the fallen girl.
Touching his hand triggers a terrifying vision of a multiple stabbing.
She screams about a blood-covered man while her father greets a guest.
The Marquis reacts with sharp interest to her claim of seeing blood.
Her power is identified as past vision, triggered by physical contact. Her father begins testing her divine gift through various difficult trials. Touching a ribbon, Helene witnesses a clandestine and illicit romantic encounter.
He praises Helene's success while lifting her chin with a sword.
The Marquise explains that her mother also possessed this divine ability.
The girl processes that her power is inherited from her late mother.
Her father offers a rare apology for his cold and distant behavior.
He claims looking at her reminded him painfully of his late life.
The Marquis apologizes for making the young child feel so lonely.
He continues his apology while the pink-haired girl weeps in his presence.
He asks his daughter if they will stay together from now on. The father asks if she will use her power for his benefit.
She asks if her obedience will make him happy and proud. A text bubble declares, "I love you, Helene," over a dark background. A tall stone tower stands alone as several years pass by.
Years later, an adult Helene sits in a tower, observing visions.
She watches a vision of a man from the Caesar family.
Helene screams in horror as a vision of violence unfolds vividly.
The Marquis smiles, confirming that a man named Caesar is a murderer. Looking exhausted, Helene expresses her gladness at being helpful to him.
The Marquis recoils in shock when Helene attempts to touch on.
He slaps her hand away and commands her not to touch him. He claims her confinement and plain clothes are for her own sake.
In a flashback, Helene's father claims his strictness is born of life.
Helene trembles, feeling pathetic despite her supposed duty to catch criminals. Royal palace envoys suddenly arrive to arrest Helene, shocking the entire household.
An envoy from the royal palace officially declares Helene Fauser under arrest.
Armed guards point their weapons at a stunned and confused Helene.
Helene and her father are bound with ropes alongside their servants.
A guard lists charges of extortion and threats against the Fauser house.
Helene's father denies the accusation of using cursed powers to cause terror.
A guard asserts that Helene possesses a terrifying and cursed power. Terrified and confused, Helene begs her father for help during the arrest.
A memory fragment shows Helene's eye glowing with an intense purple energy.
Helene's mother begs to see her daughter before being struck down.
The pink-haired woman looks on with a face of pure, silent horror.
Helene realizes her father killed her mother, shattering her entire world.
Helene questions why she never doubted her father's lies until this moment. Crying, Helene accepts that her father's love was a complete lie.
Guards roughly toss the bound pink-haired woman into a transport wagon.
An official warns Helene to prepare an excuse for her coming interrogation.
Helene fears the torture and execution that follow a forced royal confession.
The bound woman struggles fruitlessly against the ropes inside the dark wagon.
Helene refuses to die like a criminal as bandits attack the wagon.
Grinning bandits open the wagon door and discover the woman trapped inside. Helene stares in terror as the bandits move to seize her.
Helene screams for help as a mysterious hooded figure arrives nearby.
A silver-haired man removes his hood under the bright, full man.
A chibi illustration shows Helene posing happily in her blue and white dress.
Wilfrid and a companion wait to intercept the passing transport carriage.
The companion questions the rumors about the Marquis' daughter and her power.
The two men observe the sudden bandit attack on the transport carriage. Wilfrid charges into the chaos on a black horse, drawing his sword. Gagged and bound, Helene desperately prays for someone to save her life.
A bandit catches Helene as she tries to flee into the woods.
Helene instinctively calls for her father's help despite his recent betrayal.
Narrative text highlights Helene's tragic habit of still calling for her father.
Helene loses hope, wondering what the point of her life even was.
A violent red slash effect appears against a dark, blood-splattered backdrop.
Wilfried ruthlessly cuts down the bandits under the glowing moon's light.
The silver-haired prince strikes down his enemies with precise and lethal blows.
Wilfried stands victoriously over the bodies of the many defeated bandits.
The stoic knight turns his sharp gaze toward the cowering pink-haired woman.
Helene sits silently on the ground, staring up at her mysterious savior.
Wilfried recognizes the woman as the daughter of the infamous Marquis.
The silver-haired man looks down at the girl with cold, silent detachment.
Wilfried tells Helene that her reckless escape attempt was practically a suicide mission.
Helene cries out, demanding to know why he didn't let her die.
Sobbing, Helene repeats that he should have just left her there.
Wilfried calls Helene a pathetic coward for wanting death after being saved.
Wilfried mentions the dark rumors he has heard regarding her and her father.
Helene vehemently denies framing other nobles using any sort of curse power.
Helene expresses her deep rage toward the father who betrayed her.
The pink-haired woman screams about her resentment and refusal to die.
Her desperate declaration to live echoes through the silent night.
Looking bitter, the pink-haired woman stands amidst glowing purple flowers.
The gray-haired man asks if she wants to die like an insect while clinging to resentment, but she tearfully explains she has nothing left to seek revenge.
He questions if she really lost everything, reminding her of the past she witnessed.
She realizes she still possesses her mother's divine power of vision.
Standing tall, she asks the man if he wants to strike a deal.
She suggests a nobleman like him surely wants to see someone fall.
A close-up reveals her declaring her ability to see the past.
He is skeptical, so she offers to prove it right then and now.
She vows to survive and prove her value at any cost.
Beneath the moon, he decides to test her confidence.
The gray-haired man challenges her to show him her power.
He promises protection and status if her ability is proven real. Recalling her father's cold eyes, she prepares to use her sight. Visions of a murder in a lavish room flash vividly before her. A sharp burst of energy signals the end of her vision.
Exhausted, she collapses to the ground after the intense mental strain. She describes a woman in a crimson dress being murdered in a lavish room. She details the laughing murderer, prompting him to command her to follow.
She watches in surprise as the man turns away from her.
She recognizes him as Wilfried von Verde, Prince of the Kingdom.
Mounted guards arrive, asking if His Highness is unharmed after the encounter.
A red-haired man approaches the carriage as the prince would time.
The red-haired knight suggests transporting the women by horseback instead.
He realizes she is the specific lady the prince was seeking.
Wilfried orders his men to guard them as they use the carriage.
The red-haired knight asks about the carriage and the remaining corpse.
Wilfried plans to let people believe bandits took the Marquise's daughter.
Helene is startled when the prince addresses her as Lady Fauser.
She firmly rejects the family name and tells him she is Helene.
She declares she will discard her noble name and survive as Helene.
Wilfried smiles and welcomes Helene into his royal carriage.
He formally invites her to come stay at his private residence.
Standing over the bodies, Helene prepares for her new life.
The crown prince is described as a compassionate and ideal successor.
Prince Wilfried is revealed as a concubine's son with no succession rights.
Narrative text explains his reputation for being merciless toward the incompetent.
Inside the carriage, the pair sits together in a tense silence.
Wilfried sits regally, observing the passing scenery outside the carriage window. Helene wonders what connection her terrifying vision has to the prince.
Looking at the moon, she vows to rise and get revenge.
Maids begin the process of bathing and cleaning the pink-haired woman.
An older maid sternly tells her to behave herself during the bath.
The head maid watches the woman with a sharp, calculating gaze.
The maids whisper insults about her lack of hygiene and slum-like state.
Helene closes her eyes and enjoys the feeling of being cleaned.
The head maid is unsettled by the woman's intense and scary presence.
Helene reflects on how long it has been since her last bath.
Helene playfully dives underwater, causing the startled maids to cry out. The head maid roughly bathes Helene while a flashback reveals her memory of a hidden drawer.
The head maid scolds Helene for her lack of dignity during the bath as Helene apologizes.
Annoyed by the maid's attitude, Helene follows orders to go and change her clothes.
The head maid maintains a stern expression as she commands the other servants.
Helene walks away with a smirk, leaving the maid visibly unsettled after mentioning the drawer. Prince Wilfried reviews documents at his desk in a spacious, sunny palace study. The gray-haired prince remains focused on his paperwork with a cold and intellectual expression.
A servant reports to Wilfried that Helene is currently being changed for their meeting. Wilfried and the maid walk together through the palace's grand and sunlit corridors.
The pair continues their journey through the long hallway toward the guest room.
The head maid internally vows to humble Helene and expose her for being a deceptive woman. Reaching the guest room, the maid asks the prince to wait outside while she enters.
The head maid enters the room to check on Helene and is struck by shock.
A close-up captures the maid's wide-eyed realization of Helene's stunning and transformed appearance.
Helene emerges wearing a magnificent lavender gown, leaving everyone in the room completely breathless.
Wilfried stares at Helene, visibly taken aback and stunned by her striking new look.
Helene notices the prince's intense reaction and tilts her head in a silent question.
Helene offers a small, elegant smile as she faces the speechless gray-haired man.
The nearby maids are left blushing and flustered by Helene's radiant and regal beauty.
Helene worries that people are acting strangely because she thinks she might still smell.
The prince eventually turns away and leads Helene toward their next destination.
The headmaid stands frozen, completely rattled and intimidated by the young woman's presence.
She watches Helene's back with shock, unable to process the sudden shift in power.
Helene winks and warns the maid that she will surely regret not looking at her. Helene strides away confidently, leaving the head maid in a state of total bewilderment.
Helene repeats her playful yet pointed warning to the maid as she walks past.
With a triumphant smile, Helene continues walking toward her new life in the palace.
Despite the pleasant surroundings, Helene reminds herself it is still too early to trust him.
Helene reflects on terrifying rumors about Wilfried's cruelty and his habit of killing the incompetent. Wilfried opens the doors and formally presents Helene with her own private guest room. Helene is startled and surprised by the unexpected grandeur of the room she is given.
She feels overwhelmed and wonders what she is supposed to do in such luxury.
Helene reflects on her situation, noting that the prince is giving her a very splendid room.
Wilfried observes her reactions with a piercing and thoughtful gaze from the doorway.
He notes her reaction and remarks that she is clearly not a fool. Wilfried tells her to rest for now as their business will officially begin tomorrow. Left alone, Helene stands in the center of her new and lavish quarters.
Exhausted by the day's events, she collapses face down onto the soft, white bed.
Helene stares up at the ceiling, wondering what will happen to her from now on.
She focuses on her deal with the prince while properly planning her path to revenge.
A new day begins as warm sunlight floods into the ornate and peaceful bedroom.
Helene wakes up suddenly and screams, startled by the unfamiliar and bright palace environment.
She appreciates the comfort of her beautiful bed before hearing a sudden knock at the door.
The head maid enters the room accompanied by another younger and quiet servant.
Helene groans and braces herself for more conflict with the abrasive and stern maid.
The head maid approaches her with an uncharacteristically hesitant and formal tone as she enters.
Helene nervously anticipates a harsh scolding, but she notices the maid appears to be tearful. To Helene's total surprise, the head maid expresses deep and sincere gratitude toward her.
Helene stares in complete confusion at the maid's dramatic and sudden change of heart.
The maid explains she found her mother's lost keepsake in the drawer Helene described.
The head maid bows deeply to Helene, expressing sincere gratitude.
Helene reflects on the vision that helped her find the maid's item. The pink-haired woman realizes her power has many practical, helpful uses.
Helene offers a kind smile and takes the older woman's hands. Helene tells the maid she is genuinely glad the keepsake was found.
The younger maids watch in shock as Helene treats them highly.
A young maid excitedly asks if Helene can find other items. Helene laughs brightly, completely charming the group of young palace servants. The maids are delighted, hoping Helene can find their lost things too.
The older maid watches as Helene graciously manages the eager crowd.
Helene's expression shifts to determination as she refocuses on her mission.
Prince Wilfried remains focused on his paperwork within his sunlit stein. A servant informs the gray-haired prince that the lady has arrived.
Helene enters the office, now dressed in an elegant green gown.
The head maid bows respectfully before leaving the two leaders alone.
Wilfried looks up from his desk and asks if she rested well. Startled by his polite tone, Helene asks what he rests.
Blushing, she remarks that his intentions are written all over his face. Wilfried sighs, appearing slightly annoyed by her casual and blunt response.
He firmly warns her not to use her powers so carelessly.
Moving to business, he places a document down to start their meeting. A close-up captures Wilfried preparing to discuss the terms of their deal. Helene tenses up, sensing the weight of the coming conversation. Looking serious, she asks what her role in his plan entails.
Wilfried clasps his hands, stating there is a man he wants gone. With a cold, intense gaze, he identifies the target as his father.
Helene is visibly shaken by the prince's desire to kill the king.
He confirms his target is Ludwig von Welte, ruler of the kingdom.
His eyes glow with blue energy as he vows to kill him. Helene grips her dress, overwhelmed by the prince's terrifying display of hatred.
Wilfried's resolve burns brightly as he envisions striking down the current king.
A close-up of Wilfried's eye reveals his cold, unwavering murderous intent.
Narrative text describes King Ludwig von Welte as a man consumed by lust.
Visions show the king's soldiers seizing women by his imperial decree.
The narrative explains how the king discards women once he feels bored. Red roses wither away, symbolizing the many lives the king has ruined.
Helene reflects on the horrific and terrifying reputation of the current monarch. Wilfried notes that her reaction shows she knows of the king's sins. Clenching his fist, Wilfried declares he will not let him live longer. Helene looks at the prince with a mixture of fear and intrigue.
The gray-haired prince stands by the window, silhouetted against the bright sky.
He lists 4 high-ranking nobles, including Duke Waldnine and Marquis Rosenthal. He calls the noblemen leeches who only serve the king for power.
Helene reacts with shock upon hearing the name of Marquis Schallner.
She recalls the man from the visions she saw during her childhood.
Wilfried explains his strategy to destroy the nobles before killing the king.
With intense resolve, he declares his plan to become the next king.
Helene's eye captures her absolute shock at the scale of his ambition.
She considers his status as the second prince, making his plan difficult.
Helene worries about the obstacle posed by the first prince, Luca.
Helene wonders if the prince can truly surpass the first successor.
Wilfried bluntly confirms that he is inviting her to commit treason.
Helene realizes that discussing the king's death is a deadly crime.
The prince offers her a final chance to abandon the plan.
Helene clenches her fist as her resolve begins to solidify. A burning desire for vengeance reflects in the young woman's eyes.
Wilfried watches her closely, waiting for her definitive choice.
Helene recalls her father's cruel betrayal and her subsequent abandonment.
She slams her hands down, declaring her motives go beyond business.
Helene reveals that her father is responsible for her mother's death.
She resolves to use her mysterious power for her own purposes.
A dark, triumphant smile spreads across Helena's face as she agrees.
Wilfried appears satisfied with her fierce and unwavering determination. A sudden movement catches Helene off guard as she watches him.
The prince stands near the window, reflecting on their initial deal.
He suggests they upgrade their arrangement to a formal alliance.
Helene is surprised as the prince begins pouring red wine. Wilfried pauses the conversation and asks her to weigh in on it. The pink-haired woman looks at the glass with a shy expression.
Wilfried proposes a toast to the eventual fulfillment of their goals.
He formally declares his recognition of Helene as his newest ally.
The two partners clink their glasses together to seal the pact.
They both drink the wine, marking the start of their conspiracy. The pair stands together in the study, united by their secret.
Helene reacts to the strong wine as the contract is established.
Wilfried promises to shield her and take responsibility for any failures.
The prince's blue eyes shine with cold, calculated intent.
He leans in and confesses his very high expectations for her.
Helene is startled and blushes at the prince's intense proximity.
She enthusiastically agrees to meet his expectations with a bright smile.
Wilfried shifts the mood, holding his glass as he prepares to continue.
A close-up reveals the prince's sharp and analytical gaze.
Wilfried leans closer, mentioning that he intends to use her body.
Helene is completely shocked and flustered by his provocative phrasing.
The scene shifts as Wilfried's focused eyes signal a transition.
Wilfried clarifies his intent as he leans even closer to her.
He explains he wants to investigate her power's activation conditions. He presents a single quill pen to begin their first test.
He tasks her with seeing the quill's past without touching it. Wilfried ignores her discomfort and insists on continuing the training.
Helene struggles with the difficult mental task as he pushes her.
Exhausted, she realizes he meant body in a strictly experimental sense.
Wilfried takes notes on her performance while she groans in misery.
Helene recalls her father's harsh tests and fears being deemed useless.
She exhales deeply, trying to calm her racing thoughts and anxiety.
The study door opens as a vibrant, red-haired man enters. The newcomer greets them, noting how hard they have been working.
Helene looks toward the door, curious about the charismatic intruder. The red-headed man introduces himself as Alfred, captain of the knights. Alfred offers a friendly and cheerful smile to the young woman. Alfred kneels before Helene, holding her hand while Wilfried watches.
The pink-haired woman looks completely bewildered, asking what is happening. Wilfried explains that Alfred wants to test if her power works on people.
Helene responds with a warm, gentle smile during their conversation.
Alfred excitedly points out that they both share the same hair color.
From a distance, the group continues their discussion in the sunlit study. The red-haired knight rests his chin on his hand with a charming grin.
Helene offers her thanks as she prepares to stand from her chair.
As Helene loses her balance, Alfred catches her and remarks on the accident.
A close-up shows Helene's bare hand touching the hilt of the knight's sword.
A horrific vision of slaughter overwhelms Helene, causing her to scream and collapse.
Helene desperately tells herself not to faint while Wilfried and Alfred look odd.
Please provide the text you would like me to read. Helene slowly wakes up in a luxurious bed, feeling disoriented and weak.
Wilfried sits nearby in a plush chair, quietly reading a blue book.
Noticing she is stirred, the prince looks up and asks if she is awake.
Helene sits up in alarm, but the prince tells her to remain resting. Looking down at the blankets, the pink-haired woman appears deeply troubled.
Wilfried asks for a detailed explanation of what happened during their training.
Helene describes the terrifying vision of a massacre she saw when touching the sword.
The prince thoughtfully considers her words, noting the suddenness of the power's activation.
Overwhelmed by confusion, Helene covers her face and admits she does not know why.
Wilfried states that he has gained a new understanding from their failed expander.
He explains that her power requires direct contact with bare hands to activate.
Helene sits up, considering the prince's theory about objects holding strong emotions.
She questions the prince's theory regarding the influence of strong emotions.
Looking at a vision of a bloodied man, Helene agrees with his assessment.
A knock at the door interrupts them as someone offers an apology.
Wilfried remains deep in thought, resting his hand against his face.
The prince turns to leave, stating he will call for her when needed.
Helene insists they continue, but Wilfried questions her resolve given her pale face.
Stung by the suggestion of weakness, Helene shouts that she is not useless.
Helene reaches out to him, begging to prove herself despite her obvious exhaustion. Wilfried violently recoils from her touch, shouting for her to stay away.
The prince stands frozen and shaken, his expression filled with visible distress. Helene sits on the edge of the bed, stunned by his harsh reaction.
Alone in the dimly lit room, Helene curls into a defensive posture.
She remembers her father's fear of her, recalling a painful childhood memory.
The headmaid enters the room carrying a wrapped gift box.
The older woman approaches the bed to present the gift to Helene.
Helene takes the box, surprised that it came from the prince.
Inside the box, she finds white lace gloves resting on a bed of roses.
A note from Wilfried tells her to protect herself as part of her responsibility. Helene looks at the note, wondering if the prince is truly worried about her.
Touched by the unexpected kindness, the pink-haired woman begins to cry. Sometime later, Helene is surrounded by the palace maids in a bright room. Helene sits comfortably, enjoying a cup of tea during a casual gathering. Using her power, Helene points out the location of a missing teaspoon.
The maids are delighted and relieved by the success of her search.
The group thanks Helene enthusiastically as she offers them a bright, happy smile.
A maid eagerly asks Helene to predict her future next.
Another maid scolds her peer while Helene laughs off the tension.
A brown-haired maid opens the door and looks inside hesitantly.
The maids are suddenly startled by a dark and menacing atmosphere.
Wilfried stands in the doorway, looking at the group with displeasure.
He sternly commands the maids to return to their posts immediately.
Terrified, the maids stammer their compliance and quickly run away.
Wilfried scolds Helene for ignoring his order to stay in bed. Helene attempts to excuse her behavior with a lighthearted laugh.
Helene pouts and calls the prince a cheapskate for being strict. Wilfried ignores her complaint and calls her name to get attention. He watches as Helene makes a funny face with her fingers.
Wilfried sternly reminds Helene to always keep her gloves on.
Helene looks at her gloved hand, wondering about his true motives.
The brown-haired maid returns later, looking deeply troubled and worried.
She approaches Helene tentatively, asking if she could have a moment. The maid suddenly begs for help, asking Helene to use her power.
Helene is completely shocked by the maid's sudden and desperate plea.
The two women sit together on a sofa to talk privately.
The maid begins to cry while recounting a heartbreaking personal story.
She explains that her much younger sister has been missing. She describes how her sister vanished while playing in the forest. The maid laments that the officials refuse to take them seriously. She begs Helene to use her mysterious power to find her.
Helene thinks about Wilfried's warning, but feels she must act.
Helene smiles warmly and takes the maid's hands with resolve.
The maid looks up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Helene gently hugs the sobbing woman to provide some comfort. Helene stands alone in the hallway, deep in contemplation. She worries that Wilfried will never give her permission to help. Standing before the study door, she anticipates a difficult confrontation. She decides she has no other choice but to try anyway.
Wilfried looks up from his desk, questioning her request to leave.
Helene blushes and smiles, asking for permission to go out. She claims she only wants to go for a short stroll. Helene justifies her white lie as being for the maid's sake. Helene glows with joy after successfully deceiving the prince. Wilfried summons Alfred to join them in the palace stay. He informs Helene that the red-haired knight will be her bard. Helene realizes she must play along to get outside the palace.
The knight accepts the assignment with a cheerful and willing attitude.
Helene thanks the prince warmly as she prepares to depart. Alfred teases Wilfried about being overprotective of the young woman.
He asks if the prince is worried about the town's disappearances.
Wilfried clarifies that he is not worried about her personally.
Alfred laughs at the prince's cold and analytical explanation.
A document shows the portraits of the recently disappeared children.
Wilfried stares out the window, hoping that nothing happens. A concluding image shows a small mascot thanking the readers. The prince remains wary, hoping that nothing goes wrong today. Helene and Alfred prepare to depart the palace in a carriage.
Helene reviews the map with Rita, recalling the sisters' last location.
Having entered the forest, Helene remembers to veer off the path.
Alfred sighs heavily as they continue their journey through the woods.
The red-haired knight claps his hands together with a cheerful grin.
Alfred asks Helene about her destination and offers a scenic detour.
A frantic guard interrupts them, calling out for the captain's attention.
The guard delivers an urgent message regarding a discovery by Lord Wilfried.
Alfred orders an immediate retreat, only to realize Helene has disappeared. Alfred stands frozen in shock as the reality of the situation settles.
Helene runs through the dense forest, breathing heavily from the exertion.
She arrives at the secluded spring, identifying the 3 landmark trees.
A discarded flower crown on the grass catches Helene's suspicious gaze. Helene senses danger as she cautiously observes her quiet surroundings. A sudden vision reveals a young girl being kidnapped by man. Helene sees more children bound and gagged inside a dark moving carriage.
Horrified by the brutal visions, Helene covers her mouth in shock.
She connects the red ribbon from her vision to Rita's sister.
Helene panics, realizing she is standing in a site of multiple abductions.
An unknown assailant grabs Helene from behind, cutting her thoughts short.
The pink-haired woman plans her next move while a man watches.
Helene is violently struck, her world fading into a white blur.
Two kidnappers discuss Helene's beauty and her high value to potential buyers.
Helene wakes up gagged and bound, disoriented by the carriage's vibrations. She finds herself trapped in the dark wooden interior of a wagon.
Rough ropes bind Helene's hands tightly behind her back as she struggles.
She spots several other children huddled together in the shadows, all kidnapped.
Despite her terror, the pink-haired woman's eyes burn with fierce determination. Helene concludes that she is trapped in the carriage used for kidnappings.
She tries to scream through her gag, fighting against the heavy ropes.
Helene slumps to the floor, momentarily overwhelmed by the hopelessness of escape.
She recalls a past rescue by Wilfried, but fears he won't come.
A tear falls as she remembers the prince's previous heroic intervention.
Helene redoubles her efforts, refusing to let the ropes break her spirit. She resolves to save herself and the children from their grim fate.
With a silent vow, Helene prepares to fight for the innocent lives. Outside, the kidnappers are startled by the loud thumping from the cargo.
One man orders the other to quiet Helene before the carriage breaks. Helene prepares to ambush the kidnappers the moment they open the door. She thrashes against the walls, creating as much noise as possible.
The carriage shakes violently under the force of Helene's desperate struggle. Sunlight spills into the wagon as the rear curtain is pulled back. Helene sees her opening and prepares to make a final break.
A silver-haired man catches Helene as she tumbles out of the carriage.
The handsome savior holds her close, his expression calm and steady. Helene stares into the man's blue eyes, completely stunned by his appearance.
The silver-haired man stands amidst the forest, having defeated the kidnappers.
He mockingly asks if she enjoys being kidnapped, his tone teasingly familiar.
Helene reminds herself that the danger is far from over yet.
She continues to struggle, still gagged and unable to express her relief.
Alfred looks distressed while standing with the silver-haired prince in the garden.
The red-haired knight laments how suddenly the young woman went missing.
Helene expresses her deep horror regarding the fate of the missing children.
The pink-haired woman remains visibly shaken by her dark, accurate visions. Wilfried uses the found crest to immediately identify the person responsible.
Knights discover the children bound and hidden away during a raid.
The culprit is successfully apprehended and tied up by the palace knights. A rescued girl runs joyfully toward her parents in the village square.
The children return home safely as the scene shifts to the palace.
Helene sits quietly on a sofa in her lavish palace room.
The pink-haired woman enjoys a peaceful moment with a cup of tea.
Rita bursts through the door, calling for Helene in a panic.
Helene is surprised and happy to see the brown-haired maid again.
The maid credits Helene's power for the rescue of her young sister.
Rita expresses her immense gratitude to the woman who saved her family.
Another maid observes the emotional reunion between Helene and her friend.
The head maid enters the room to check on the young woman.
Feeling fulfilled, Helene hums a happy tune while walking down the hall.
Wilfried sits at his desk, his expression incredibly stern and focused.
Helene enters the study, noticing the cold and oppressive atmosphere immediately.
The prince informs her that he has learned the full story.
He explains the merchant's cruel plan to sell the attractive children away.
Helene is stunned by the realization of the merchant's true, dark motives.
The pink-haired woman tries to hide her nervousness with a smile.
She resolves to continue helping people while still pursuing her own revenge.
Helene thinks about using her unique power to benefit those in need.
A sudden, harsh shout echoes through the room, cutting her thoughts short.
Helene flinches in surprise at the prince's sudden and angry outburst.
Wilfried stands up, towering over his desk with an authoritative, angry glare.
He demands to know the purpose of assigning her a protective guard.
The prince mentions that only luck saved her from the kidnappers' attack. Helene is left speechless by the intensity of the prince's reprimand.
Wilfried asks why she was not honest about her original intentions.
He explains that lying and sneaking out was completely unnecessary and dangerous.
Dejected and ashamed, Helene looks down while avoiding the prince's gaze.
She admits she lied because of his previous warnings about her power.
A heavy silence fills the study as she reflects on her mistake. Wilfried explains he was already investigating the area before she even left.
Alfred remembers the moment he saw the messenger returning from the palace. The silver-haired man commands Helene to listen carefully to his instructions. He tells her to be honest about wanting to use her power. Leaning closer, Wilfried sternly orders the pink-haired woman to stop lying.
Helene looks away, feeling a deep sense of guilt and regret.
She berates herself for seeking praise while causing such a massive problem. The young woman offers a sincere and quiet apology to the prince.
Wilfried abruptly states a specific number while standing at his desk.
He reveals that 38 children were saved because of her intervention.
The prince watches her closely, his earlier anger replaced by a steady gaze.
Overwhelmed by the validation and the news, Helene begins to cry. Wilfried stands silently before her as she processes the magnitude of her actions. Helene beams with a joyful expression, thanking Wilfried for his help. Wilfried watches the young woman with a composed and steady gaze.
A close-up highlights the golden rose pen on the prince's cravat.
Helene stares ahead, her expression shifting to one of sudden realization.
The scene transitions to a darkened room draped in heavy curtains.
A subordinate reports a terrible setback, but the mustachioed marquis dismisses any concerns about being caught.
The mustachioed man drinks wine, mocking Wilfried as a useless dog.
A small purple-haired mascot thanks the readers at the chapter's end.
The mustachioed man continues his arrogant rant, dismissing Wilfried as a mongrel.
Back at the palace, Alfred stands before Wilfried in the study.
Wilfried looks up from his paperwork, appearing deeply contemplative and serious.
Alfred explains that the investigation into the child trafficking has hit a wall.
The red-haired knight suggests that a powerful backer must be protecting the merchant.
Alfred continues discussing the gravity of the case with the silver-haired prince.
Wilfried confirms he is already well aware of the situation's inherent difficulties.
Bright sunlight streams through a tall, ornate window in the palace hallway.
3 maids stand together, looking excited and determined to help. Helene touches her chin thoughtfully, lost in her own private reflections.
The maids discuss their persistent inability to find a specific missing person.
A maid reassures Helene, referencing her previous reprimand from the prince. The 2 maids lower their heads, expressing their deep distress and helplessness.
Helene smiles warmly, promising to assist them once their work is finished. She joyfully invites the maids to gather in her room later. Helene sits alone on her sofa, topping a book while contemplating.
She feels overwhelmed as a long line of maids seeks up. A maid looks up with wide, hopeful eyes, feeling immense gratitude.
Helene smiles kindly as she accepts a maid's heartfelt thanks.
A pink-haired chibi version of Helene laments how truly exhausting her day is.
The head maid and Rita stand together, looking at Helene calmly.
Helene stands up in her red dress, greeting the head maid.
The head maid places a hand on her chest, appearing proud. Helene smiles brightly, telling the staff that they need not worry.
Rita suggests that the young woman take a short walk outdoors. Helene walks through a bright palace corridor flanked by white roses. She notices soldiers practicing their swordsmanship in a sunny green courtyard. 2 knights take a break from their training, appearing quite winded.
The knights wave enthusiastically upon spotting Lady Helene walking nearby.
Helene stops in surprise as the soldiers loudly call her name.
Alfred appears and shouts at the knights to resume their training immediately. The red-haired knight apologizes to Helene for his men's disruptive behavior.
He explains that the soldiers admire her knight-like bravery in the case.
Alfred asks Helene about her intended destination for her stroll today.
He offers to show the young woman a perfect spot nearby.
Helene gasps in awe as she arrives at a beautiful garden. A sparkling fountain stands centered among blooming white and yellow flowers. Helene beams with joy, marveling at the existence of such beauty. She notices a man's legs resting on a garden bench nearby.
Helene looks stunned, her eyes widening as she recognizes the person.
She realizes that Wilfried is peacefully sleeping outdoors among the flowers.
Helene quietly sits on the wooden bench beside the sleeping prince.
Helene admires the sleeping prince, finding his features surprisingly handsome. The pink-haired woman notes his sharp, elegant nose and thin lips.
Helene admits to herself that Wilfried is actually quite handsome.
Startled by her own thoughts, Helene panics and questions herself.
Seeing a blue butterfly nearby, Helene calls out in Belay.
The silver-haired man suddenly wakes and demands to know who is there.
Wilfried reacts instinctively, startling Helene as he suddenly sits up.
A close-up shows Wilfried's gloved hand firmly grabbing Helene's wrist.
Helene stares in shock, stunned by the prince's intense reaction.
Helene cries out as she suddenly sees a vision of Wilfried's past.
Helene takes a deep breath, processing her long and exhausting day. Alert and defensive, Wilfried asks who has approached him while sleeping. Helene finds herself trapped within a vision of oppressive, thick darkness. Sweat beads on Helene's face as the overwhelming vision terrifies her. Returning to reality, Helene wonders about the darkness she just witnessed. Wilfried gazes at her intensely, asking if she saw anything specific. Helene avoids his gaze and lies, claiming she didn't see anything. The pair sits together on the garden bench in the sunlight.
Helene reflects on the unique pitch-black darkness she saw in him.
Fragments of other terrifying pasts flicker through Helene's dark memories.
She concludes that the empty darkness feels like the scariest thing.
Wilfried silently places his own jacket around Helene's trembling shoulders.
Startled by the gesture, Helene gasps in surprise at the prince.
Flustered and confused, Helene stammers as she addresses the prince's kindness. Wilfried watches her with a calm, steady, and unreadable expression. The silver-haired man simply tells the pink-haired woman to wear it.
Helene realizes Wilfried was worried about her, despite her initial confusion.
The pink-haired woman feels his consideration is quite unexpected and strange. Helene ponders the deep darkness she saw hidden within his heart. She fears the darkness is deep enough to swallow others whole. Wilfried notes that she looks much more tired than she usually does. Helene is startled by his direct observation of her current state. The silver-haired man asks Helene what she is doing there anyway. Helene replies that the peaceful garden feels very nice to her. She remarks on how much she likes the many blooming flowers. Helene beams with a joyful expression while winking at the prince.
Wilfried watches the pink-haired woman with a composed and steady gaze.
The prince mentions that she looks more tired than she usually does. Helene reacts with nervous surprise, sweat visible on her blushing face.
Wilfried lets out a heavy, contemplative sigh while sitting beside her.
Helene asks with a worried expression if the prince is mad.
Wilfried explains he was only worried she might be overdoing it.
Helene stands up and insists she is not overdoing it.
She expresses her happiness at seeing everyone else in the palace happy.
Helene recalls the many maids who have offered their thanks. She reflects on how the staff smile at her with genuine joy.
Helene realizes her father's smiles in the past were only masses. She reflects that she might have never known true happiness before.
The pink-haired woman beams a bright, sincere smile at the prince.
Helene offers her deepest thanks to Wilfried for everything with Sen.
The silver-haired man stands with his hands clasped together in front of him. The pink-haired woman recalls a past conversation where she was told she could live without a blood-soaked path. Wilfried stares ahead with a serious, focused expression as he speaks to her.
Helene looks surprised, her purple eyes wide with sudden shock.
Helene remembers watching someone during a dark confrontation and affirms her desire to see them.
The pink-haired woman places her hand over her heart with a determined look.
Helene smiles playfully while making a light-hearted remark to the prince.
Helene reminds Wilfried that they are currently allies under a contract they must honor.
Wilfried looks away thoughtfully as he considers the point she just made.
The silver-haired man stands up from the bench with his back to the viewer.
Wilfried extends his hand toward her with a determined and steady gaze.
A horse-drawn carriage sits parked on the paved grounds of the palace estate.
Inside the moving carriage, the two sit together in pensive silence.
Helene looks down with a bead of sweat on her face, appearing troubled.
The pink-haired woman watches the silver-haired man across the carriage as they ride.
Wilfried appears deeply serious as he focuses on investigating the missing children cases.
Helene is devastated to learn that more children are missing, realizing the group they found was not the full total.
Text states that the clues needed should still be at the merchant's manor, suggesting the missing children are still alive.
Wilfried looks forward with an intense and resolute gaze as he plans their next move.
Helene resolves to find the remaining children, her expression hardening with fierce determination.
A horse-drawn carriage pulls up to the entrance of a massive grand mansion.
The pair walks through a corridor illuminated by floating magical lights and glowing footprints.
Wilfried leads the way through the darkened and silent mansion interior.
Wilfried identifies the room where the children were imprisoned, while Helene notices it is similar to her own past prison.
The pink-haired woman is haunted by a traumatic memory of being shut away in a cold, lonely room. Wilfried asks what is wrong as Helene nervously claims that nothing is the matter. Helene takes a steadying breath and tells herself she has to pull herself together.
The pink-haired woman insists she is fine, despite appearing deeply shaken by the room.
Vision fragments show terrified children being led away as men stand by a doorway.
A large text bubble emphasizes the horrifying realization of what Helene is sensing. Wilfried deduces that the room was only a temporary holding place for the children.
The pink-haired woman listens intently to his explanation, her eyes wide with shock.
Wilfried explains how the merchant bowed to a servant, suggesting a powerful business partner was the true mastermind. The two stand together before the ornate dragon-crested gates of the merchant's estate.
A vision shows the children being loaded into a carriage at dusk to be taken away.
Text confirms the children were loaded into a carriage and transported from the grounds.
Helene looks at the gate with a troubled expression as she processes the vision.
Wilfried notes the carriage had brown cloth and no crest, deducing it was an unmarked rental used for secrecy.
Helene questions the significance of the kidnappers using a rental carriage.
Wilfried explains that wealthy merchants or nobles normally use their own carriages that bear a family crest.
A text bubble emphasizes that noble carriages always bear the owner's crest somewhere on them.
Helene realizes the merchant used a rental carriage specifically to hide the transport from her past visions.
Wilfried states that they have investigated as far as they can at this location.
Wilfried turns to leave, noting they must now painstakingly search through the carriage inn's guest ledgers.
The prince explains they need to verify if each identity listed in the ledgers is even a real person.
Helene reacts with serious determination as she considers the massive amount of work ahead.
Wilfried warns her that she has used a lot of power today and has been acting strangely.
The pink-haired woman clenches her red dress, her knuckles turning white from the tension.
A dark vision shows 3 children tied up and gagged together in the darkness.
Helene cries out that she knows their fear because she has been imprisoned before too.
Helene vows to prevent children from suffering a past like hers.
Helene tells Wilfried she wants to save the children immediately. The pair share an intense look of mutual, silent understanding.
They arrive at a lot filled with many parked horse-drawn carriages.
Helene looks troubled as a man reports to the silver-haired prince. The man tells Wilfried that every carriage is currently present and ready.
Wilfried tells Helene he won't question her methods, but warns against overexertion.
The prince asks if she understands, and she tells him to leave it to her.
The pink-haired woman walks toward the large rows of covered carriages.
Helene uses her power and realizes she still hasn't found the children.
Sweating from the strain, Helene thinks she is fine and can continue.
Helene pants heavily, showing the extreme physical toll of using her power. Helene thinks her eyes are blurring and her body feels incredibly heavy.
Helene refuses to give up and finds the carriage, but gasps in shock.
Helene is stunned, wondering about the shocking identity of the person seen.
The pink-haired woman stares in disbelief at the truth she has uncovered.
Fragments of a vision reveal a gate bearing a shell-shaped family crest.
Helene collapses into Wilfried's arms as he calls out her name in alarm.
Wilfried recognizes the shell crest as belonging to the king's loyal retainers.
The man with the mustache is identified as Marquise Schurner.
Wilfried praises the unconscious Helene, then smiles with dark satisfaction. Soldiers engage in rigorous combat training on the palace's gravel grounds.
Wilfried spars with the soldier, moving with aggressive and intense focus.
The defeated soldier falls to the ground and shouts that he yields.
Pointing his sword at the fallen man, Wilfried says they are not finished.
The silver-haired prince commandingly orders the soldier to pick up his sword.
One soldier asks if His Highness is off today, and the other agrees.
Wilfried spars aggressively while calling for the next challenger over and over.
The silver-haired man stands among the many soldiers he has defeated.
Wilfried walks away from the training area, still calling for the next opponent. The red-haired man places a firm hand on the prince's shoulder. Alfred tells the men to take a break and drink plenty of water.
Wilfried turns to the red-haired man and asks why he was stopped.
Alfred asks if the prince is trying to turn his men into useless wrecks. The two men face each other in a moment of silent tension.
A close-up shows Wilfried's cold, calculated eye as he considers his moves.
Alfred gazes back with a serious look as he mentions the Marquis.
Alfred says Helene confirms Schurmer is one of the king's loyal retainers.
Wilfried listens with his eyes closed, his face reflecting cold fury.
The red-haired man continues to speak about the gravity of the situation.
Wilfried clenches his fist tightly while stating that there is a reason.
Alfred points out the children were good-looking and asks if Wilfried understands.
Wilfried labels them monsters and fumes that children are offered to the king.
Alfred remarks that the fiend has no regard for the victims' ages.
Wilfried states that they have not yet obtained definitive proof of the claim.
Alfred insists they have, as blood is seen dripping from a hand.
Wilfried reveals that the same tragic fate happened to his mother too.
Alfred stands completely stunned by the prince's shocking and dark revelation.
Wilfried stands up, declaring they have finally found the trail of the villain. He vows to bring down Schurmer and destroy the king's hold on power.
Wilfried's hands tremble violently, stained with fresh, dark blood.
Alfred urges the prince to slow down and compose himself.
The silver-haired man orders his captain to leave so he can think.
Alfred reaches out to the prince, his voice full of concern.
Wilfried glares with intense fury, repeating his command to get out. Alfred exits the study, the heavy door slamming shut behind him.
Standing alone, Wilfried vows to kill the one responsible for this.
Alfred stands outside the closed door, appearing deeply troubled.
The red-haired captain sighs heavily, feeling the weight of the situation.
Alfred turns to see the palace governess standing nearby in the hall.
The woman asks how the prince is doing after the incident.
Alfred reveals that the prince hasn't eaten since the previous night.
The governess sighs with worry about his highness's state.
In her chambers, a maid reports that Helene woke up recently.
Alfred tells the governess about his deep concern for the prince. The older woman listens to Alfred's assessment with a grim expression.
Alfred admits that even he cannot rein in the prince right now. Someone approaches the pair in the hallway as they discuss the prince. Helene appears, dressed in a white gown and looking very determined. The two are surprised to see the lady awake and moving. The pink-haired woman stands with resolve, her expression firm and steady. Alfred and the governess stare at her, momentarily lost for words.
Alfred greets Helene, surprised to find her up so soon.
The captain offers to arrange a meeting with the prince immediately.
Alfred beams at her, his usual cheerful and playful demeanor returning.
Helene looks slightly confused by the offer to see the prince.
The red-haired man offers a reassuring and bright smile to Helene. Inside a moving carriage, Helene and Wilfried sit together in silence.
Wilfried stares out the window with a deeply troubled, serious expression.
Helene is internally panicked by the oppressive silence in the carriage.
Helene wakes up in her bed, looking dazed and confused.
She reflects on her heavy body and realizes she collapsed again.
Helene thinks with satisfaction about finally finding the man she sought. She identifies Marquise Schurmer as the mastermind and her father's associate.
Sitting up, Helene hears someone entering her bedroom. A maid and the governess enter to check on the lady.
The pink-haired woman offers a gentle and polite smile to her. The governess informs her that she has been asleep since yesterday. Helene rejects the offer of food, claiming she has no appetite.
She states she has no time to eat and must see Wilfried.
The maid calls out to her as Helene starts to get up.
While being dressed, Helene recalls Schurmer visiting her father's estate often.
A memory shows Schurmer and her father meeting several times.
She recalls her father ignoring the Marquise's blood-soaked past and cruelty. Helene hopes Schurmer knows where her missing father is currently hiding. She resolves to use her power to tell Wilfried everything she knows.
A playful memory shows Helene being loaded into a carriage earlier.
She recalls setting off on their journey without knowing the destination. Back in the present, Wilfried is lost in grim, silent thought.
Helene coughs politely to get the prince's attention in the carriage.
Helene mentions they are heading into the town. Helene questions what they are meant to do in the time.
Helene expresses her anxiety about being unable to speak with Wilfried normally.
Wilfried's silence suggests something significant happened to cause his behavior.
Helene stares in shock, fearing the implications of the prince's mood.
The silver-haired prince remains stoic as the pink-haired woman watches.
Helene realizes that Wilfried is currently consumed by thoughts of revenge.
Helene offers to help the prince with his difficult task.
Helene asserts that they are allies who should work together.
Wilfried argues that being allies does not require him to share everything with her.
The prince remains firm in his silent and cold resolve. Helene reacts with sudden intensity, clenching her ornate white dress.
Wilfried refuses to involve her in his plans and tells her to rest.
Outraged, Helene rejects the idea of being excluded from the situation.
Helene asserts that she is the one who determines her own involvement.
The pink-haired woman lunges toward the startled silver-haired prince.
Helene pins Wilfried back, surrounded by a celebratory floral atmosphere.
Looming over him, Helene questions the purpose of her presence, if not to help. Helene vows to follow the prince through any dark path he chooses.
Helene promises to remain by Wilfried's side regardless of the path he kicks.
She demands that Wilfried also stay beside her on her own path.
Helene insists he never claim the situation has nothing to do with her.
Wilfried's blue eye widens in surprise at her bold declaration.
The prince is left speechless by the woman's intense display.
Helene suddenly panics and retracts her intense words in heavy embarrassment.
Blushing, Helene quickly changes the subject to her sudden hunger.
Wilfried smirks with satisfaction after witnessing Helene's passionate outburst.
Helene looks up expectantly as Wilfried invites her to join him.
Wilfried closes his eyes and smiles gently at the pink-haired woman.
Helene apologizes for acting out of line during her emotional moment. Wilfried stands by the carriage and tells Helene it is time.
The prince offers to personally show Helene around the town.
A young girl and her mother browse the marketplace stalls.
Townspeople move through the streets of the sunlit city.
Helene walks cheerfully beside the stoic prince through the town.
A man recognizes Wilfried and greets him with a friendly smile.
The silver-haired prince walks through the crowd with quiet dignity.
Helene is enchanted by the lively sights of the marketplace.
Wilfried pauses to consider something as Helene watches him curiously.
Helene expresses her hope that he will treat her kindly. 3 children recognize the prince as a knight and thank him for swordplay practice.
Wilfried tells the children he is busy showing someone around the town today.
The children admire Helene's beauty as she greets them politely.
Helene is flustered when a child asks if she is the prince's sweetheart. Panicked, Helene clarifies they are just friends, which the boy finds hard to believe. The children playfully remark that the prince is a good choice for her.
They note he is nice despite looking scary and are told to move alone.
Wilfried commandingly tells the children to go away.
The prince appears slightly flustered while Helene giggles at the interaction.
Helene watches the silver-haired man with a warm, genuine smile.
The silver-haired man looks away with a contemplative and serious expression.
Wilfried states that the children must learn to defend themselves.
Helene smiles warmly while Wilfried watches her from a short distance.
The prince observes the surroundings with a sharp and alert gaze.
Wilfried turns away, his mind focused on their immediate mission.
The marketplace is filled with various citizens and many busy stalls.
Helene remarks that the atmosphere in the town feels quite different.
The pink-haired woman looks at the beautiful architecture in great wonder.
Wilfried points out a bakery and mentions some local chestnut sweets. The silver-haired prince offers a rare and gentle smile to Helene.
Helene warns Wilfried not to continue with his current line of thought.
The pair stands together in the heart of the bustling marketplace.
Helene playfully asserts that the prince totally enjoys the local sweets. The pink-haired woman laughs heartily at the prince's silent reaction.
Wilfried maintains his stoic and serious demeanor despite her lighthearted laughter. The silver-haired man reluctantly agrees, bringing their brief conversation to an end. The two walk together through the sunlit streets of the town.
The scene shifts to the ornate interior of a grand building.
Helene and Wilfried sit across from each other at a cue table. Helene appears startled and flustered by the prince's sudden and direct question.
Wilfried asks what is wrong while watching Helene's reaction very closely.
The pink-haired woman struggles to maintain her composure during their tea.
Helene admits her past isolation and explains she has never visited shops.
Wilfried closes his eyes, processing the woman's unexpected and sad revelation.
A waiter approaches the table to serve the pair their food.
A delicious-looking slice of almond tart is placed on the table.
Helene exclaims that the dessert looks absolutely delicious and very appetizing. Helene watches Wilfried intently as he takes a bite of the tart.
Eating the tart, Helene happily notes that the texture is very crispy.
Wilfried provides a short affirmation as he continues with his meal.
The silver-haired prince gazes forward with a focused and intense expression.
Wilfried concedes that Helene is correct about their current situation.
Helene looks down, her face reflecting a deep and internal conflict.
Standing by the window, Helene looks out at the town below. Helene reflects on protecting the townspeople's happiness and saving captive children.
The pink-haired woman's expression hardens with a newfound and fierce determination.
Wilfried adjusts his cravat, preparing for the next part of their plan.
Helene smiles brightly, finding hope despite the gravity of their mission.
The two remain seated in the quiet elegance of the room.
Wilfried and Helene stand together, ready to depart the grand building.
The silver-haired man tells Helene it is finally time to leave.
Helene reaches out her hand toward the prince, then suddenly hesitates.
The pink-haired woman looks shocked by her own impulsive and bold actions.
Helene internally questions her actions and feels embarrassed about almost touching him.
Wilfried suddenly reaches out and takes a firm hold of Helene's arm.
The silver-haired prince pulls Helene into a sudden and close embrace.
Blushing deeply, Helene stammers out the name of the silver-haired prince.
Helene is left completely stunned and speechless by the prince's proximity.
Wilfried leans in extremely close, his face just inches from Helene's. Information regarding the studio and various social media accounts is shown.